Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janvalabha Girivaradhari Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we'll be reading from Canto 11, Chapter 25, Text 19, which talks about three modes and beyond. So we'll goes till 36, so we'll finish the chapter and we'll read all the verses. So if you want to go around the room and if you could read the translation, please, that would be great.
With the increase of the mode of goodness, the strength of the demigods similarly increases. When passion increases, the demoniac becomes strong. And with the rise of ignorance, the strength of the most wicked increases.
It should be understood that alert wakefulness comes from the mode of goodness, sleep with dreaming from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The fourth state of consciousness pervades these three and is transcendental.
Learned persons dedicated to Vedic culture are elevated by the mode of goodness to higher and higher positions. The mode of ignorance, on the other hand, forces one to fall head first into lower and lower births. And by the mode of passion, one continues transmigrating through human bodies.
Those who leave this world in the mode of goodness go to the heavenly planets. Those who pass away in the mode of passion remain in the world of human beings, and those dying in the mode of ignorance must go to hell. But those who are free from the influence of all modes of nature come to me.
Work performed as an offering to me, without consideration of the fruit, is considered to be in the mode of goodness. Work performed with a desire to enjoy the results is in the mode of passion, and work impelled by violence and envy is in the mode of ignorance.
Absolute knowledge is in the mode of purpose. Knowledge based on duality is in the mode of passion. Materialistic knowledge is in the mode of ignorance. Knowledge based upon me, however, is understood to be transcendent.
Residence in the forest is in the mode of goodness. Residence in a town is in the mode of passion. Residence in a gambling house displays the quality of ignorance. And residence in a place where I reside is transcendent.
A worker free of attachment is in the mode of goodness. A worker blinded by personal desire is in the mode of passion. And a worker who has completely forgotten how to tell right from wrong is in the mode of ignorance. But a worker who has taken shelter of me is understood to be transcendental to the modes of nature.
Faith directed towards spiritual life is in the mode of goodness. Faith rooted in fruit of work is in the mode of passion. Faith residing in irreligious activities is in the mode of ignorance. But faith in my devotional service is purely transcendental.
Food that is wholesome, pure, and obtained without difficulty is in the mode of goodness. Food that gives immediate pleasure to the senses is in the mode of passion, and food that is unclean and causes distress is in the mode of ignorance.
Happiness derived from the self is in the mode of goodness. Happiness based on sense gratification is in the mode of passion. And happiness based on delusion and degradation is in the mode of ignorance. But the happiness found within me is transcendental.
Therefore, material substance, place, result of activity, time, knowledge, work, the performer of work, faith, state of consciousness, species of life, and destination after death are all based on the three modes of material nature.
All best of human beings, all states of material being, are related to the interaction of the enjoying soul and the material nature. Whether seen, heard of, or only conceived within the mind, they are without exception constituted of the modes of nature.
O gentle Uddhava, all these different phases of conditioned life arise from work born of the modes of material nature. The living entity who conquers these modes, manifested from the mind, can dedicate himself to me by the process of devotional service, and thus attain pure love for me.
Therefore, having achieved this human form of life, which allows one to develop full knowledge, those who are intelligent should free themselves from all contamination of the modes of nature and engage exclusively in loving service to me.
A wise sage, free from all material association and unbewildered, should subdue his senses and worship me. He should conquer the modes of passion and ignorance by engaging himself only with things in the mode of goodness.
Fixed in devotional service, the sage should also conquer the material mode of goodness by indifference toward the modes. Thus, pacified within his mind, the spirit soul, freed from the modes of nature, gives up the very cause of his conditioned life and attains me.
Freed from the subtle conditioning of the mind and from the modes of nature born of material consciousness, the living entity becomes completely satisfied by experiencing my transcendental form. He no longer searches for enjoyment in the external energy, nor does he contemplate or remember such enjoyment within himself.
We can read the Sanskrit of the last text. Jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasaya sambhavai mayaiva brahmano purno na bahirnantrascharet jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasya sambhava mayava brahmana purna na bahirnantarashchare jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasya sambhava mayava brahmana purna na bahirnantarashchare. Else would like to share? Jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasya sambhavai mayeva brahmana purna na bahirnantarashchare jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasya sambhavai mayeva brahmana purna na bahirnantarashchare jivo jiva vinirmukto gunesh chasya sambhavai mayava brahmana purna na bahirnantarashchare. We can read the translation together one more time. Freed from the subtle conditioning of the mind, from the modes of nature born of material consciousness, the living entity becomes completely satisfied by experiencing my transcendental form. He no longer searches for enjoyment in external energy, nor does he contemplate or remember such enjoyment within himself. So, we're talking about the three modes of material nature here. And yesterday, Gadishan Prabhu was talking about how or why they're being discussed multiple times, right? It's because of the importance of the modes of nature, right? So the modes of nature are basically these subtle forces, right, that are acting upon the consciousness and facilitating the interaction with the material world. So depending on kind of there may be like a certain material object, but depending on what consciousness we are in, we will have kind of reaction based on that mode of material nature. So for example, let's say there is someone in a train, and like the train stops for a second, and then the person looks out the window and there's nice green field and there's a tree, and then the person sees that tree and is like, oh, it would be so nice actually if I could go and sit under the tree and read or chant, right? And there may be another person who's like, oh, that field looks wonderful, I wish I could just jog or run and do that. Or there may be another person who sees that tree and is like, oh, it would be wonderful if I could just take a nap under that tree, right? So depending on kind of like what modes are influencing us at the time, that same object may result in different reaction or responses from us. Right? And so the reason it's really important is that we are in this material world, right? So it's important to know what are the forces acting in the material world, so that way we can be conscious of that and then be reflective upon it. Right? So, for example, like there are people who do like these backpacking trips or extreme camping, right? And then they'll spend a lot of time knowing the places where they're going in. Like if there's like, what are the trees that are there? Like what is edible, what is non-edible? Make sure, you know, like I can eat these fruits, but like not eating these berries or something like that. This may be poisonous. So they know like, hey, if I run out of food or if I run out of this, like where are the water bodies and all those things. So depending on kind of things they're doing, it's important for them so that way they know like the place where I'm going, what are really the forces, what that place looks like, right? So that's the reason it's being talked upon so much is, you know, being in the material world, we have to engage in the material world, trying to connect with Krishna. So it's helpful to know what are the forces that are there, that are acting upon in the material world, right? So that's kind of the importance of it. But as a bhakta, as a devotee, our goal is one, right? Which is trying to connect with Krishna. And then the way we do that is by practicing devotional service. So as devotees, we're not like pro the modes of nature and we're not against the modes of nature. Right? We're basically always seeing, we're taking up what is good for our devotional life and then rejecting what's not good for our devotional life. And so that's kind of the key principle. And so, but at some point last year, I had this like dream where I was sitting with in a big room with a bunch of devotees, and my spiritual master was in the room, and then he gave this service to print these papers for him, and he gave the same service to me and my god brother. And so I went and I printed the paper, and then I went in the room, and you know, my god brother gave the papers to our spiritual master, and then I gave the paper. And I don't know, at some point, I guess I saw like there were some spots that got on the paper, and then the paper were also not organized, like they were in this random order. And so, and then here there was the copy that my god brother gave. It was like perfectly organized, like, you know, so in order, like no spot, nothing. And the spiritual master goes through that, and you know, he gets really upset, and you know, he's like, he's really angry at me, and he asked me to leave the room. And then, you know, some of my god brothers come later, and they're like, you know, he doesn't want to see you, you know. Then I wake up and I'm just so like distorted, like what should I take from this dream? Like, you know, is my spiritual master displeased with me? Like, did I do something wrong? Like, what am I supposed to learn from here? Right? It was really heavy. So when I reached out to one of my Siksha gurus, and I was like, you know, this is what happened. Like, what am I supposed to take from this dream? And he's like, well, basically everything comes down to, you know, it's like, you take what's good for your spiritual life and you reject what's not good for your spiritual life. So if you think, you know, this is affecting your relationship in a good way, it's like, you know, maybe I need to work more on my organization skills. Maybe that is something that I'm lacking, and I need to work on that to make sure that I'm doing better service for Krishna, better service for my spiritual master. Then that is a good dream, right? But if that's basically bringing anger and rejection to the devotional service, or, you know, there is some mood like that, then, you know, that was just a dream and you should just kind of reject it, right? So that's how we take our interactions, is to make sure that if it is helping us to get closer to Krishna, if it is helping us to be able to do our sadhana better, perform our devotional service better, then we take it, right? If it's not, then we reject it. Right? So similarly, we do that in the mode of nature too. Like, and you can see how Krishna uses, like, it's not someone needs to be in the mode of passion to really fight a war, right? If you're in fighting a war and it's like, you know, like, I'm just satisfied, I'll throw this arrow, like if it goes, it's fine, you know, Krishna, you're in charge, right? It's like, it's not going to work that way, right? So Krishna has to fight, like light that fire if Arjuna needs to fight that war and win that war. And so there are multiple examples in the scriptures where the different modes are being facilitated to serve Krishna. There are times where someone may be in mode of goodness, but like Krishna may be doing something for them, like not to be in a mode of goodness and try something else, right? Does anyone have any examples that they can remember where like the person may be in mode of goodness and Krishna may have like asked or he was kind of guided to not do something that may be so much in mode of goodness? Yes, bro.
It reminds me of the story of King Parikshit and how he was like such an amazing king who was very very in the mode of goodness. But then when he came upon the Muni who was meditating, and when needed some water, he got angry and offended, and he put this dead snake around the Muni's neck, which was very kind of mode of ignorance. Like it was kind of an ignorant and degrading thing to do.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think of our Srila Prabhupada before he came to America. He was in Vrindavan in the Radha Damodar temple studying scriptures and prasadam every day. It's like perfect. But on the order of a spiritual master, which does kind of represents the order of Krishna, got on a boat, came into New York City in the slums, the grime, homeless people, dead people, drunk people, all kinds of things to spread Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? The one I was thinking of specific, or there were couples I was thinking of specifically. It's like the one where you can see Maharaj Yudhishthir. He's in so mode of goodness, right? And he doesn't want to lie, and he doesn't want to go to Dronacharya and say, like Ashwatthama got killed. And then Krishna asks him to do that, to win the war. Right? So it's like it's an extreme example, right? Doesn't mean that like you lie or do that for serving Krishna, but you can see that like in an extreme example. Also, like the other thing I was thinking of was Sudama Brahmin. Like Acharyas tells us like that one part of the story is also that like how actually Sudama Brahmin was really attached to his austerity. And so he's like, look at me, like I'm living so austerely. And so Krishna helping him not to be attached to his austerity, like Krishna provides him the palace and everything, when he goes to Krishna, but he doesn't ask for it, and then he comes back and our palace is there. So all of these, modes can be engaged in Krishna service. And like when Srila Prabhupada was on the planet, you would see Prabhupada would say, I'll go to the temple which distributes the most books, right, to engage people in the service. But like if you're like want to distribute more books, you gotta be, there's like he's encouraging that mode of passions, like in devotees. But again, those passion is being used to serve Krishna and being in Krishna consciousness, right? So you can, again, we can always try to remember that like our goal is to, and again, we can, by serving Krishna, we can transcend the modes, right? And it's really beautiful, like kind of in all the verses that we saw, in some of these verses where it's like, there are these modes, but like this is, serving me or thinking of me is like transcendental, right? Like living in this, one is like, living in the forest is in mode of goodness, living in cities in passion, but, living in like where I reside is transcendental, right? So you can kind of see like we're in the city in Gainesville, but like within Krishna house, it's just so transcendental, right? So always trying to like, when we are remembering Krishna or thinking of Krishna, that can be, we can transcend these modes, right? And that's kind of the goal of a bhakta is always to serve Krishna, and then again, like take whatever is helpful, and then reject what may not be helpful, and how we can use that. It's like we there's, I think yesterday Aishan Prabhu played that clip of the marshmallows, right? It's like such a beautiful thing, and it's like until I became a devotee, I always thought like, I mean, I may have said this before too, it's like I always thought like patience was so overrated. Like in all, it's like if you could think of like some quality, like, you could pick, like, and some good quality, like hardworking, humility, or strength, like all of these things. If someone would have asked me, like, hey, I give you a boon, you can pick one good quality, like patience would not be anywhere in that list. Because I just, for some reason, I always thought it was, it's just so great. But like being, it's actually seeing like practicing devotional life. It's made me actually realize how important being patient is actually. It's like, and it's such a good quality to have. And so, I was like always aware of like that the marshmallow principle. So it's like always like trying to, and I was like, I've been impatient, and it was when not being in devotional life, it's like it's a good thing because I want to do things faster. And so it's like, and there's this saying, it says, some people make things happen, some people observe things happen, and some people think what happened. Right? So it's like you can see in those different modes, right? So the people making things happen are in mode of passion, and some people who are observing things, right, they're kind of in mode of goodness, being detached with kind of like being an observer of their emotions. Like, hey, like that thing got me angry. Like, why was it that I actually got angry? What is it that I need to work on, right? So they're kind of reflecting as these modes are acting, and then through this reflection, you can kind of see a pattern, or see like what causes those angers or those anxiety, and then we can kind of work on those. And then some people are just in mode of ignorance, like they're just like, oh, like what's going on, like what the hell happened, right? It's like they're just like oblivious to everything around them, or don't care. So seeing like patience is such a wonderful quality. So it's like I'm always trying to see how I can facilitate that in my kids. So like a lot of times I would do that, like, and Amrita Kelly at the beginning, she would be like, you're just torturing them. So like I would bring this like candy, or I would know something that I like, so I'll give it to them, and I'm like, hey, here's the candy, or here's this chocolate that you really like, you can hold it, but you cannot have it until tomorrow morning. So so now I think they're actually used to it. So it's like recently I did that to Lila Rita. There's this like this chocolate hummus that you can get. Like it's hummus flavored with chocolate. She loves it. So I tell Amrita Kelly, oh, I got it, and there's like a part of me as a father who really wants to, give what my kids really like and enjoy. So I tell Amrita Kelly, like, it's in the fridge. I want to tell the kids. She's like, no, like they cannot have it in the night. I was like, oh, it's like perfect. Like perfect for me to tell them, like, hey, here's the thing, but you cannot have it tonight. You'll have it in the morning. So I tell Lila Amrita, I was like, oh, Lila Amrita, I got you something. She's like, what did you get me? It's like, I got you chocolate hummus. She's like, chocolate hummus? And so I was like, yeah, you want to see it? But it's nighttime. You cannot have chocolate hummus in the nighttime. You can only have it in the morning. She's like, okay. And then she holds it, and then she's really attached. She's like, okay, I'll have it in the morning. And then, so lately I was seeing this, like where, when we're driving, anytime there's a red light, they will get, they'll get like really impatient. It's like, and Lila Amrita, she doesn't know, she doesn't say, why is it taking so long? She's like, why is it so boring? Like instead of so long, it's like, why is it so boring? I don't know where she picked it up from. She always like, why is this so boring? So anything that's taking so long, it's like, why is this so boring? So then she goes like, Daddy, why are we stopped? I was like, well, Rajarshi, goes, and my son, he sees, he's like, oh, there's a red light. It's like, So then I was like, and they're getting impatient. So I'm like, well, what you can do is you can chant, and then, you can say to Krishna to turn that light to green. And so like, I'll show you. So, I was chanting, and then I'm observing, which lights are going red and when this will go green. So I'm chanting, and then, once like I know like the light will probably turn green, I like as I see, like Krishna did that. He turned it to green. So Rajarshi looks at me for a second. He's like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, no, I saw you doing that at green. It's like, no, you can try it. So then obviously like he wants the magic to work too. So he'll continue now. Like yesterday, it was really like, it was such a good feeling to see, like, when like your kids are taking up Krishna consciousness in this subtle ways. It's like, so the kids are in the back, I'm driving, there's a red light and a stop. And so Lila Amrita goes, why are we stopped, Daddy? And Rajarshi goes, it's a red light. Namita goes, "Oh, brother, chant." So then Rajesh is just chanting, and he just chants till the light goes green, and then as soon as the light goes green, he stops. It's like, see, it worked. And so like they're doing this over and over again. So I'm like, oh, it's such a beautiful thing, like that Krishna gave me that intelligence at the point to kind of use it, and it's working. So so these like, again, the point is to observe, right, like how the modes are acting and like what they are bringing in us, and then being reflecting upon it, right? So a lot of times people either like express emotions, or suppress emotions, right? When you are expressing emotions, a lot of times it will be in mode of passion, right? You're just kind of like reacting in the moment, or even suppressing it is in mode of ignorance, actually, because it's not healthy, right? You're kind of holding on to it, and it just causes more and more stress. You either get stress, or your anxiety, or anger, or panic attack, all of these things that can cause if you're not addressing those emotions, right? And then the third is to kind of reflecting and addressing upon those emotions, right? So again, like being the observer of our emotions, and then trying to see like what's causing them, how the modes are acting, and then being reflective on journaling, and then seeing, talking to senior devotees of like what may be causing for that pattern, and then how we can use it or address it so we can serve Krishna better. Because again, like our goal is not to be in mode of goodness, right? Again, as I was saying, like the examples where if the mode of goodness is not helping in our spiritual life, right, then what's the point of it, right? And so whatever will be helpful for us to build that relationship with Krishna, to serve the devotees nicely, to serve Srila Prabhupada and his mission nicely, that's the key, and that's what's important. So, any reflections, questions? And Prabhu, you raised your hand. Sorry, I didn't get a chance. There was something you wanted to share. Sorry, I didn't. Right. So Krishna is so kind, right? Like even for the story, I think, yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Prabhu. Right. So he said, okay, if you don't want to lie, there's also Ashwatthama, the elephant, and then the Ashwatthama elephant is killed. And so you can just say, Ashwatthama, if I'm remembering the story correctly, it's like Ashwatthama, the elephant got killed, but when Maharaj Yudhishthira says the elephant, the conch shell is blowed, so the elephant part is not heard, or something like that, right? So, Krishna still is so kind, it's like, all right, like, but, you don't want to do it. Okay, I'll try to, reduce the bar for you, or like trying to help you, right? And it's like the devotees are the same way too, right? When Srila Prabhupada first came, it's like the first set of disciples who got initiated is like, you got to chant 64 rounds, right? And then it's like, Prabhupada, there's like no way we can chant 64 rounds. It's like, all right, like try 32. And then, it's like, Prabhupada, like even like 32 rounds, like we cannot chant 32 rounds. Like, all right, like 16 rounds, but no less, right? And so, like the devotees are even, more merciful than Krishna, because they're bringing us closer to Krishna. So you can see kind of, Srila Prabhupada's mercy in that way. So yeah, thank you for bringing that. Like they're kind to facilitating that.
I thought of another example. One time when Krishna had like a terrible headache, or he was really sick or something, and then he went around saying, oh, in order to cure my terrible sickness, I need to take the dust of someone's feet on my head. And everyone he went around in like Vrindavan and asked, they were like, no, we can't do that, because that's it's very impious. It's very like, you can go down to hell for that. And of course, so the brahmanas and people who are trying to be pious are not going to do it. And then the gopis are like, yes, we will totally do it. We will totally give Krishna the dust of our feet. We don't care if we go to hell, as long as Krishna is happy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's such a beautiful pastime. It's like, it's like Krishna having a headache. It's like, how can Supreme Personality of Godhead have a headache? But like, how can Supreme Personality of Godhead does not want to do what he wants to do, right? So it's like, it's funny. It's like, it's so inconceivable. but he asked Narad Muni, is like, yeah, like get me the dust of lotus feet, and then everyone is just like, oh, like we don't want to go to hell, but you see the mood of the gopis. They're like, oh, like Krishna has a headache, like whatever we need to do, right? So it's like, again, like as Prabhu was sharing the story of Srila Prabhupada too, it's like, like what he's seeing is just so many souls that are suffering, right? And he's like, I mean, we see as devotees, we're desiring, is like, it would be so nice, if I can be in Vrindavan and leave my body in Vrindavan, or, be in like my last years of life in Vrindavan, just like be there with Krishna. And, Srila Prabhupada had all of that, but what his compassion was so like overflowing that he could see the suffering of the souls, right? And then where else like then suffering of the souls in the Western world? It's like they didn't even have an idea of like who Krishna is. And so he leaves all of those things, and comes all the way, with all the suffering that he has to go through, just so that he can bring us like closer to Krishna, right? And so it's just such an important thing to remember, right? It's just like everything that Srila Prabhupada has done for us and the devotees do for us, right? Is just so commendable to bring us closer to Krishna. Any other?
Thank you. It was very wonderful, the example you used with your children. I was speaking with Shesha Prabhu yesterday, and we were talking about Varnashram in terms of implementing and the relationship between those persons who are the leaders in Varnashram and the general mass of people. And they do, the social engineering that they do is quite like what you did with your children in the car. It was just we were trying to think of some examples, etc., but that was perfect. Just in terms, because often you'll hear in the Ramayana and Mahabharata that the relationship of the king and those leaders, they treat the citizens just like family. But it doesn't oftentimes go into more detail, but that was a brilliant example of exactly the type of it may not be done on that level, but the objective is the same as you were describing in terms of how can I give them experience that will lead them forward in terms of these steps. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, the example is that of Arjuna in terms of, like you were mentioning about the modes of nature. So it was just a very, immediately from just having that conversation yesterday till today, it was just like, oh yeah, there it is in action. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's really not. I was there's the Chasing the Rhinos book series, right? And there's the first volume just came, where it's the audio version book came out, and I was listening to it, and it's so nice. I highly recommend it. It's just like kind of, you can feel the hearing like directly from Shyam Sundar Prabhu is just like he's such a great storyteller, and you can see that in his book, but then even hearing in his audio and with all the expressions and everything, it's just like the reason it kind of reminded me of it just like brings you back to like that time with them. You feel like you're right there, and you can be in the room when they're like having these wonderful exchanges with Prabhupada, or you can see like things that they're going through, and they have like no idea at first, like who Krishna is, but you can hear like somehow he has some relation with, like he has some past karma. Like he tells a little bit about his background stories, and like how he was always attracted to like part of India, and he was finding books on Eastern wisdom and spirituality and Buddhism and those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, it's just like wonderful of like how Prabhupada, because of, and he like, we can see how Prabhupada really does that so nicely, like all these initial like people in the West, like you'll see they'll attend the morning program, and then I think there's like a coffee or a bagel shop next door, donut shop. Yeah. And the devotees would go right there after that, and Prabhupada would walk and they'll just kind of like, put their head down. But it's not, like Prabhupada knew about all this stuff, it's like Shyam Sundar Prabhu, after even getting initiated, there's that, the pastime of like him smoking for a while, and then he's carving deities in California, the first Jagannath deities. And Prabhupada comes to see how the progress is going. And he sees like a pack of cigarette close to the deities, and Prabhupada like uses sticks and he knocks down the cigarette and he's like, like no more. So it's not, it's like, again, like showing the compassion of the devotees, like Prabhupada was just willing to take, like we hear, like the spiritual master takes all this karma, it's like Prabhupada is willing to do all of this. And, some of his like disciples now, they're like, yeah, this was really powerful. One time I was like hearing Indra Swami Maharaj's offering to Srila Prabhupada on his Vyasa Puja. I think this was like 4 or 5 years ago. And he started the offering by saying something on the lines of like, like Prabhupada, where you are in like in the spiritual world or not. It's like, why would you think like Prabhupada is not in the spiritual world? And then, or, wherever you are in the lower planets, trying to get people back to closer to Krishna. Right? And so it's just like and you see like all these Prabhupada disciples who are really like willing to go to hellish planets and just like serve Prabhupada, and like, yes, we'll be there in hellish planets, as as it will be wonderful as long as Prabhupada is there, as long as you have the association of your spiritual master. So it's just commendable of how much compassion these devotees have for like fallen souls like us. So any other comments or yes, please?
This point has been brought up, like when Krishna was talking about, I think Adi Shankar mentioned it yesterday, he was talking about the modes in Bhagavad Gita also, but that is like time is rushed, it's in the battlefield, so he mentions all that, but now he has more time when he's talking to Uddhava, so he can go more into detail. And I like how the chapter is titled 3 Modes and Beyond, and the translations that we read today, they actually like show like beyond, like Krishna would say, this is in the ignorance, passion, and goodness. But then things like, if you live where I live, that is transcendental. Like the worker who offers his like work to me is transcendental. So those like points are like very helpful, like just to see like how do you get out of the 3 modes and not just be attached to like even the mode of goodness. So I really appreciate like Krishna's going beyond, as the chapter says.
Yeah, he's giving us a little bit of that taste, like like beyond this, like we'll be there in this end.
Thank you very much for the class. Yeah, I was thinking, and your examples, as you were mentioning, Prabhupada disciples, I was thinking about another. It's a nice illustration of that, having a license to violate some, general principles for the sake of a higher principle, which is mentioned here, last couple of verses at the chapter, devotional service being the highest principle, right?
Right.
So I was thinking about the example of Jadurani and Srila Prabhupada. Maybe you heard. She's one of our first painters that was trained by Prabhupada personally. So she had a task to do some painting, but for the reference, there was one photo in Srila Prabhupada's room. So she had to go and she knocked, and so she looked on the wall, but between her and the painting there was Prabhupada's bed. So Prabhupada was in her room, so she couldn't see because there was obstruction. So she started jumping just to take a better look. So Prabhupada noticed on the back she was jumping. It's like, what are you doing? So then she explains, well, I don't want to step over your paraphernalia, which is an offense, right? But I do have a task, a duty, a service to do this painting, so I need this as my reference. And then Prabhupada just dismissed this jumping and said, for the service, to Krishna, you can step on my head. Just making it clear. Illustrating, just the extent of compassion and service Prabhupada was ready to, and was and still is taking to serve his Guru and ultimately Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was nice.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I hadn't heard that one before. Thank you for sharing it. Yes, Prabhu.
What was the last formula? You gave it really quickly for processing things that came up. It went like observing them and then journaling them and then speaking with other devotees maybe about things that you... Can you give that formula again, please?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just like recognizing that there is probably something, right? So the way we can recognize it is just being separate from the situation itself, right? And usually it's hard to do it in the moment, right? Because there's just so many emotions that are coming. And so then like being afterwards, like what is it like that may have triggered it? Like what was said that probably triggered it, and then you kind of journal those things and start like analyzing things afterwards of like what may have caused it. You analyze those things, and then when you're starting to journal it and you can now like see through those, then you may see a pattern, right? Like, hey, this is when this happens, that's what's making me angry, right? And then once you probably and sometimes you may not see a pattern, right? It may be hard for us because again, like the false ego is always making me see that, I'm this perfect being, like I don't have any imperfections. But again, you may or may not be able to see it, but then you can either, like discuss that with like a senior devotee, a therapist, a senior person who thinks, is kind of, who may be able to help you. And then it's like, hey, this is like what I journal and I'm seeing like this happened and I got angry, or this happened, this is bringing fear in me. Can you help me? Maybe there's a pattern, and then how I can address it. And then once you can probably figure out like a pattern or what the problem is, then you can figure out how you can address that. Does that help a bit? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Prabhu.
I really appreciate the point that came up. I think it's a very profound point in bhakti that for us, truth means that which brings us closer to Krishna. You brought that up with the dream. Maybe if someone was interested in psychology or dream work or what have you, they might analyze it more. Like, well, no, but what did it mean? Maybe there's bad stuff and good stuff. What were the symbols? What were the metaphors? But the guidance that you received is like, what about that dream is helpful for devotional service? What isn't? And that's what you accept or reject. Or even with your children, right? Someone might hear the story, perhaps skeptical, like, oh, of course, Krishna doesn't change the light. But as far as the children are concerned, no, he does change the light. And the fact that brings them closer to Krishna, that transcends, what might be true or false. It's a different way of looking at the world, because I think especially in the West, we have this tendency like, what's right? What's correct? We want a final answer. I know for me, I've experienced that, and I know other devotees have experienced it as well. Like reading the Bhagavatam or some of the books, sometimes you come across a story or something in Prabhupada's purport or some character, and you're like, okay, this is, what? Really? But the point of everything we're given in bhakti, of all the guidance we're given and all the shastras, is to bring us closer to Krishna. And so that's the question, like, is this bringing me closer to Krishna? It's a different way of defining truth than how people generally see it. We don't need a final answer. We need the answer that brings us closer to Krishna.
Thank you.
I really liked Hugo Prabhu's analysis of the traffic light story, and I wanted to add to it a little bit as well, to extend it a little bit, because I've been reading a lot of Sadhaputta, And so when you kind of start to understand what he's saying, it's about that, like, and yeah, in Western science we always are looking for this right answer, but saying that, like, oh, if you look at the stoplights, like, oh, the fact that it turns green, it's from the electricity and the signals and the switches and everything. That's not really a final answer. That describes the machinery, that describes how it works, but then it's like, well, why does electricity work? Oh, it's Maxwell's equations. Okay, but like, why is it that way? Right. That in the ultimate analysis, you have to see Krishna in everything, because otherwise, why was there a Big Bang? Right. Like what happened? There must have been something that started everything, right. And there must be something that keeps everything going, and something that set up all of these very complicated rules of nature and sustains them and makes sure that, yes, this time the light does turn green at the right time. And so you can kind of go through these different layers of understanding that way. So yeah, if your kids grow up and they're like, nah, Krishna doesn't do that, you can be like, nah, Sarabhuta says he did.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, these, again, it's like, you see, like, even with Big Bang and things like that, like, even in the Western world, like, people are expecting some kind of order, though, right? It's like a lot of times you'll see people being atheists or becoming into atheists, they're like, why are bad things happening to good people? Well, why should they not happen if it's just a Big Bang and everything is just random, right? Like, there should be an order? Like, who is making that order? If there's no God, if there is no higher personality, then there shouldn't be any order existing, right? Like, everything is just like, it's just randomly, right? So just even the question of that brings, like, hey, you want an order in the world. Why is there should be an order? Like, then there must be someone who's controlling that and, bringing that order. And then one time, the story that, like, when the topic of, you brought a really good point, Prabhu, of like what's right or what's not right, right? Like, when that comes up a lot, like, there was one example that Prabhupada gave multiple times, and then this devotee was giving in the class. I was like, oh, this is like a perfect thing. So like, so there's a person who is going on a railway station and he finds a wallet, right? And someone lost their wallet. So it's like, what is the right thing to do is, like, pick up that wallet and put it in your pocket. Or it's like, no, it doesn't belong to me, so I'm not touching it. Or is that the right thing to do, right? And, like Prabhupada says, that actually the right thing to do is, you take the wallet and try to figure out, like, who's the owner of the wallet and try to give it back to the owner, right? So similarly, like, we are in this material world, who's actually the owner of the material world? Like, who is giving all these things? It's like, yes, you plant, kind of an example that you can, right? Like, you plant the seed, or, the tree will grow up. Like, there may be a science behind it if you water, but then, like, there are so many times, like, why there's always, like, probability, and, why, like, machine can break sometimes, like, why is that happening? One thing, I plant, like, the seed and water it and it grows into a beautiful tree, but then the same tree, I do the same process and it doesn't work. Like, so there are things that are kind of beyond our scope of control. And so then who is really controlling that? And so if there's an owner, then we need to find who's the owner of this material world and then try to give it back to him, right? And that's what we do by, like, offering everything that we have, the boga, and then, Krishna gives it back to us. Prasadam. So again, like, the simple story of, like, if a friend brings you, like, all these, he comes into your house and, you welcome, and he brings you all these produce. It's like, oh, thank you for the produce, and you just, kept it. And, you don't, like, make anything out of it, and you share a good meal, it's just like, I'm just keeping it for myself. There's, like, no reciprocation. Is that really the right thing to do? So it's like, if there is a controller, since you're expecting things to be in order, where's that order coming from? Is there someone who's in charge of it? And if there's an in charge, an owner, then the right way to, and again, I was here and I was given, there are all these things that are there before me. And so the right thing is to offer it back to the owner, right? And so that's what we try to do in one sense in bhakti, is to basically give it back to Krishna, or offer it to Krishna, because that's how we're giving it. We're on time, right, bro? Yeah. Any other comments or questions? So much.
Yeah.
Material